March 21st, 2021. High above Austria, private jet cuts through the sky. Inside, Vladislav Klyushin, a Russian oligarch who, just a year ago, received a Medal of Honor signed by Vladimir Putin himself. Now, he's on his way to a luxury ski trip in Switzerland, but he has no idea the FBI has been watching him the whole time, waiting for this exact moment. This jet is flying straight into a trap. Is this the moment they finally catch the man who hacked Wall Street? By the way, special credits to CNBC for the research behind this story. I've linked to their full article and podcast in the description. May 1st, 2018, Boston. Near the Harvard campus, a 20-year-old student stares at his laptop. Snapchat is about to release its earnings. He's ready to bet $2,000, nearly every dollar he has, betting on a spike, just like last time, when Snap shocked Wall Street and went up 26%. Analysts were confident Snap would gain 3 million new users. They were ready for a win. But then, the numbers dropped. Snap didn't gain users. It lost millions. The stock crashed 22%. And just like that, the student lost everything. And he wasn't the only one. Thousands more had gambled the same way and got burned. They all knew the risks. It was all part of the game. But what if someone wasn't guessing? What if someone already knew Snapchat's results before the actual release? 2 days earlier in Monaco, on a white yacht, a man checks his phone, reading exactly the same earnings report. It hasn't been released yet, but he already has it. 2 days before the rest, this man is Vladislav Klyushin. He's not betting, he's executing, because he already knows what's coming. Klyushin is no student. He's one of the most powerful people in Russia, and he lives like it. Private jets, luxury cars, and of course, this yacht. During the 2018 World Cup, the global soccer tournament held in Russia, Klyushin had front row seats for himself and his whole team. But while the world watched football, he watched illegally gained insider info. It all started with M13, the cybersecurity firm he founded in Moscow. Klyushin was already rising through the ranks. He was a smart businessman who knew how to work with power. Not long before, he built software that helped the Russian government watch the news and track what people were saying online. It worked, and it made him trusted by people in high places. But when he started M13, everything changed. It took things to a whole new level. Officially, the company protected politicians and big companies from cyber attacks. But secretly, they weren't stopping hackers, they were the hackers. It started when Klyushin needed someone who could break into the most secure places online without being seen. That's where Ivan Yermakov came in. If you've heard the name before, that's because he wasn't just any hacker. He was one of the guys behind the 2016 US election hacks. He helped breach the email servers of Hillary Clinton's campaign and the Democratic National Committee. Thousands of internal emails were stolen and strategically leaked just days before the election. So the FBI was already after him. He was on wanted posters. But that wasn't all. He had also hacked a nuclear energy company in Pennsylvania and a Swiss chemical lab, the same one investigating the poisoning of a former Russian spy in Britain. Yermakov was an officer in Unit 26165 of the GRU, Russia's military intelligence. There, he wasn't just trained to hack. He was shaped into one of the most dangerous hackers on the planet. And now, he was working for Klyushin. But not just working. They became inseparable. Dining at upscale restaurants, drinking vodka in private saunas, the full Russian elite experience. Klyushin even handed Yermakov a luxury apartment. And somehow, in between hacks and wire transfers, they got hooked on billions. A show about traders bending the rules, chasing power, and cashing out before the crash. While they watched it for fun, they were scripting their own version in real time. And it all started with one hack right into the heart of Wall Street. Yermakov knew he didn't need to break into these big companies to get their earnings reports. There was a way to get them easier. Instead of targeting the companies themselves, he went after the so-called filing agents, firms that quietly handled earnings reports before they went public. and he picked two of the biggest: Donnelly Financial Solutions and Toppin Merrill. Snap, Tesla, Roku. These filing agents had them all, plus hundreds of smaller public companies most people have never heard of. These smaller ones were often even better to trade because they were less watched and more volatile. A surprise earnings report from an obscure firm could move faster than Tesla and make even more. To get into the filing agent's systems, Yermakov stole employee usernames and passwords. Once inside, he had access to confidential reports from nearly any company he wanted. Everything was right there before it went public. He downloaded thousands of files. It was like having a time machine that told you exactly what would happen before it happened. But while Yermakov and the team had no idea, someone inside the filing agent had spotted something strange. The computers were secretly sending data to foreign servers. This is where experts were brought in. Someone went to great lengths to cover their tracks. Was this the opening they needed to move in on Klyushin? The two Russians were actually a dream team. Klyushin ran the whole thing like a CEO. He called the shots, and Yermakov was breaking into systems, stealing company results. And that gave him something almost no one else had: a head start on Wall Street. But Klyushin needed traders. That's where Igor Sladkov and Mikhail Erzak came in. They weren't financial geniuses, but they were loyal. That was the most important thing. Then there was Alexei Ehrlich, the broker, who lived in the US. He had access to real markets. So he made the trades look normal, like everyday activity, but they were anything but normal. The strategy was simple: place huge bets just minutes before the news dropped, cash out before anyone else knew what was going on. And for a while, it worked. But they made one mistake. Remember those foreign servers? An employee flagged them, and experts took a second look. They found out the servers were paid in Bitcoin, and when investigators traced the transaction, it led them straight to an IP address. It was serious enough to bring in the FBI, because the address linked back to Moscow. While the FBI quietly closed in, the M13 team kept trading, completely unaware they were watched. Some trades made $100,000, others made $500,000 or more. But here's the strange part. If you know even a little about the stock market, you're probably thinking the same thing. Why didn't they make way more money? FBI Special Agent BJ Kang, the man who took down insider trading kingpin Raj Rajaratnam, says that if any hedge fund had the info Klyushin's team had, it would be the best performing hedge fund in history. So what held them back? First, Klyushin didn't want to stand out, but more importantly, they were terrible traders. They were a great team with world-class hackers, but when it came to trading, they were awful, almost embarrassingly bad. But maybe that was the most dangerous part, because despite their incompetence, they were still winning. They were still making millions. At one point, Klyushin even joked in chat,
"We're like the Wolf of Wall Street."
They weren't just quoting the movie, they were living it. Chat after chat, they sent each other memes from the movie. Greedy traders, fast money, no rules. They thought it was funny. And that's when everything started to change. They weren't just taking bigger bets, they were spending big too. One of them dropped $180,000 on a Patek Philippe watch, posting a picture with the caption,
"Time is money, and we've got both."
They didn't know that the FBI was collecting all of it. Screenshots, receipts, chat logs. The Bureau realized something critical. This was a group of guys who just stumbled into a gold mine and had no idea how to manage it. They weren't mobsters. They were overconfident amateurs with dangerous access, and that made them even more reckless, resulting in sometimes even losing money, even with insider information. Sometimes they misread the reports. Other times, they completely missed key details. And often, the market just didn't react the way they expected. The chats the FBI uncovered revealed just how clueless they really were.
What are you thinking to do with Roku?
So far, there's no reason for such a drastic fall.
We acted too hastily.
This was not us who were hastily. This was the market that acted strangely.
Should we wait for a comeback?
I think so too. too big of a loss otherwise.
We implement poor trading ideas due to low-level competencies as traders.
We suck in placing stops and taking profit.
But still, they made, or stole, over $93 million. For Klyushin, that wasn't enough. He had a bigger plan, starting a hedge fund. He pitched it like this: a revolutionary trading app powered by media monitoring and social signals. No mention of hacking, no mention of stolen earnings reports, just a slick story for investors. He brought in clients. Some were old friends, others were wealthy Russians. One investor put in $500,000 and walked away with nearly $1 million. Klyushin took a massive 60% cut of the profits, but the clients didn't care, as long as the cash kept coming. They made more than $15 million thanks to Klyushin. But all this money didn't go unnoticed. M13 started raising red flags at Saxo Bank, the Danish online broker they used to place their trades. It's the kind of platform you'd expect casual traders to use, not the kind where people are moving millions. Over and over again, large trades hit the market just minutes before big company announcements. Someone at Saxo noticed, so the broker wanted to get into a call with the M13 team to get an explanation for the trades. This is where Klyushin had to make a plan. On the call, he explains that M13 developed an app called Preston, a tool that analyzes social media trends to predict how the markets will move. This was his explanation for its success. The employee then asks him directly if he was 100% sure he never used insider information, and he asked about the Tesla trade, the one that made him millions. What was his strategy? Klyushin claimed it was simple. He bought Tesla after seeing a tweet from Elon Musk. But on the call, he could tell the Saxo Bank employee wasn't convinced, so he doubled down and said he'd show them the Preston app as proof. It was a bluff, and it only made things worse. At the same time, they had no idea the FBI was already watching, quietly. And while they were still connecting the dots, Klyushin made a crucial mistake. The app they used to communicate, Threema, was supposed to be secure, but it wasn't. Not even close. Inside the app, Klyushin casually sent messages from his outside investors to the rest of the crew.
What did we earn today? Our comrades are wondering.
Vlad, you are exposing our organization. This is bad.
Vlad, stop sending to Threema. So sorry.
And that's how they get you, and you end up as a defendant in the courtroom. It was a bad move now.
Sorry, did a dumb thing. We'll delete the messages now.
Most of the messages were gone, but he forgot to delete a few. It was just enough for the FBI to build a case. And they found something else too. The group was using a tool called AirVPN, meant to mask their true locations. Every trade, every message, every login was routed through it. It made the Russians untraceable, until one of them made a mistake. One night, a hacker logged into his iTunes account, but forgot to turn on AirVPN. Just once. But that was enough. Now the FBI had an IP address. Once again, it pointed straight to Moscow. But what they uncovered next flipped the whole case upside down. The account was registered under a real name, Ivan Yermakov. And that was that. Now the FBI had a name, a face, and a location. This wasn't just a theory anymore. It was real, and it was serious. Yermakov was sitting in Moscow, quietly stacking dollars into a safe. He had no clue that every day, agents were digging deeper, and then they found it, the exact location. On this street, in an ordinary office building in southern Moscow, there was a company called M13. It looked like a normal cybersecurity firm. They had a clean website, official clients, even a front desk. But behind closed doors, they were hacking US companies. The same names kept showing up: Igor Sladkov, Mikhail Erzak, Alexei Ehrlich. The FBI had them. Names, faces, digital fingerprints. They knew exactly who was behind the keyboard. But there was one problem. They were all in Russia, and Russia doesn't extradite its own. Not for cybercrime, not for anything. So the FBI waited. They watched, and they hoped that one of them would slip up, that someone would leave Russian soil. Realistically, The FBI knew this case was going nowhere, because let's be honest, who in their right mind would leave Russia now? But everything changed when Klyushin flew to Switzerland. He knew he wasn't supposed to be there, not with an active US arrest warrant hanging over his head, but he had a plan. He used a fake name, thought he could slip in quietly, but he was wrong, and the FBI had been watching. They already knew Klyushin was the leader. If they could only catch one person, it had to be him. So the Bureau dug deeper into his past. They discovered he wasn't always rich and powerful. Far from it. Klyushin came from nothing. He never met his biological father. His stepfather was killed in a car robbery when he was just 14. But somehow, he climbed. Just like Putin, Klyushin held a law degree. For Putin, it led him to the KGB, the Russian CIA. For Klyushin, he opened doors in the Kremlin. After earning his degree, Klyushin didn't fade into the background. He taught at the Moscow State Linguistic University, building networks in academia while developing his IT expertise. But he wasn't just a professor. Behind the scenes, he was quietly forming high-level connections. Then everything shifted. From working in construction, he went to marketing, and eventually, a cybersecurity empire. The same empire is now under the watch of US authorities. The moment Klyushin booked his flight, they notified Swiss authorities, and they waited. On March 21st, 2021, Vladislav Klyushin landed in Switzerland. A private helicopter was waiting to fly him straight to Zermatt, the alpine playground of the ultra-rich. Within minutes after landing, he was arrested by Swiss police, ready to be handed over to the FBI. But this is where things get strange. Just days after Klyushin landed in Switzerland, both Russia and the US wanted him. Russia claimed he was guilty of financial fraud and demanded his return, which was oddly convenient for them. The US accused him of insider trading based on hacked earnings reports, and suddenly, Switzerland was caught in the middle of a geopolitical tug-of-war. But here's what makes it even weirder. Klyushin wasn't just some businessman. His company worked directly with the Kremlin. Some say the US wanted him not just for trading crimes, but for what he knew about Russian cyber operations. Klyushin hired one of Switzerland's top lawyers and took the battle all the way to the highest court. He assumed his lawyers could fight it, but the FBI had already filed for extradition. They handed over everything: trade data, emails, chats, IP logs, the iTunes slip. Switzerland reviewed the case and saw that Russia's charges didn't match up with Swiss law. So in the end, the judges sided with the US. In December 2021, Klyushin was flown from Zurich to Boston and handed over to the FBI. He now faces charges of security fraud, wire fraud, unauthorized computer access, and insider trading. The courtroom in Boston was quiet, but the stakes were massive. Vladislav Klyushin, once a powerful businessman in Moscow, now sat in a plain suit, silent behind a defense table. He didn't look like a criminal mastermind, but the US government saw him as something else entirely. Someone who turned Wall Street into his personal casino. The prosecutors had spent months building the case, and now they were going to show the jury everything. They painted him as a successful tech entrepreneur, not a hacker. Why would a man with millions risk everything just to make a little more? His defense team brought in character witnesses, old colleagues, professors, even former clients. They all described him the same way. But prosecutors weren't buying it. They pulled up internal messages from Threema. Klyushin knew it was illegal, and he did it anyway. Then came the trading records, one after another, each one linked to earning reports, accessed before the public ever saw them. They showed how millions of dollars moved between accounts linked to Klyushin's company. A few hours later, they came back with the verdict. In February 2023, after a 2-week trial, a jury found Klyushin guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to 9 years in federal prison. He was also ordered to pay back more than $34 million in illegal profits. But even behind bars, this story wasn't over, because Klyushin wasn't just any hacker. He had deep ties to Russia's intelligence services, including GRU operatives involved in cyber warfare, election interference, and military campaigns. He knew things, and that made him valuable. Back in Moscow, his arrest and trial sparked outrage. Russian officials called it political. They claimed the US had kidnapped a businessman on vacation. But behind the scenes, something else was unfolding. Klyushin wasn't just a suspect anymore. He became a bargaining chip. And suddenly, talk of prisoner swaps was back on the table. Journalists, soldiers, even spies. The kind of trades governments only make in the shadows. Names were exchanged behind closed doors. According to multiple reports, Klyushin's name was on Russia's list. He was one of the top candidates for a swap, alongside arms dealers and intelligence officers. Letting him go could help bring home Americans stuck in Russian prisons. But keeping Klyushin meant holding on to leverage. In the end, he wasn't just convicted, he was traded. In a secretive prisoner swap between the US and Russia, Klyushin went home. Meanwhile, Ivan Yermakov and the others stayed in Russia. Never caught, and probably never will be. If you want more stories like this, just click the video on your screen now.